The pot slipped before she felt it leave her hands. It struck the stone floor with a hollow crack, splitting the kitchen's rhythm in two. Broth rushed across the flags in a steaming tide, carrying shreds of onion and bone. No one moved to help her. The scullery boy only clicked his tongue. Somewhere behind her, a senior maid exhaled sharply through her nose. "Useless thing," someone murmured. "Unwanted girls always are." The word did not echo in the room. It echoed inside her. She dropped to her knees at once, scrubbing at the spreading liquid with linen already too worn to absorb much. Steam dampened her lashes. The heat against her skin felt almost like shame made visible. Above her, copper pans swayed from their hooks as the winter wind battered the outer walls. The storm had been building since dawn. Snow pressed hard against the narrow kitchen windows, turning the glass into a dull, lightless sheet. No sun, no horizon, only white. She kept her head lowered as she worked. It was safer that way. Faces invited judgment. Silence, at least, could be endured. This was her place, below stairs, below notice, below kindness. A year earlier, she had still possessed a surname spoken with gentleness. A cottage where smoke curled from the chimney, even in lean months. A mother whose hands smelled of flour and rosemary. Now, those memories arrived only in fragments. A closed door barred from within. A small trunk left in snow. A voice, not unkind, only tired, telling her there was no room left for another mouth. She had walked miles with that trunk, sold her last ribbon for bread, slept one night inside a chapel vestibule where frost formed on the hymn boards. When she reached the ducal estate, she had not asked for dignity. Only work, only warmth. The housekeeper, stern but practical, had taken her in as kitchen help. A temporary measure, she said, until spring posts opened elsewhere. Spring had come and gone. She remained, not valued, not dismissed, simply kept. "Leave that," the cook ordered now, stepping over the spill. "There is other work." She rose at once, hands reddened from scalding broth, and moved back to her station. Turnips waited there, misshapen, winter hard, fit more for livestock than table. She began peeling them with precise, economical strokes. Cooking was the only place her hands did not tremble. Where others saw scraps, she saw possibility. Bones became broth. Stale oats became bread. Wilted apples, when sugared and spiced, softened into comfort. These small transformations were the last inheritance her mother had left her. Recipes learned through winters harsher than this one. No one praised the results, but the pots returned empty. That was praise enough. By mid-afternoon, the storm worsened. Wind forced smoke back down the chimney flues, filling the kitchen with a bitter haze. Footmen arrived stamped with snow, bringing news from above stairs. Roads to London were gone beneath drifts. Supply wagons halted, letters delayed, and the Duke himself, newly returned for Parliament, was forced to remain through Christmas at the estate. The announcement shifted the kitchen's atmosphere at once. More mouths, fewer stores, longer winter. She listened without looking up, fingers still moving through her work. The Duke meant little to her in personal terms. She had glimpsed him only once, a tall figure crossing the courtyard, coat dusted with snow, expression distant with thought. Men like him belonged to another climate entirely, one of velvet, firelight, and decisions that never smelled of boiling bones. Yet his presence would change everything below stairs. That night, rations were quietly reduced. Less meat in the stew, more water in the broth. Even the bread loaves emerged smaller, their crusts darker to disguise the thinning flour. She noticed all of it, measured, calculated, adapted. Near midnight, when most of the household had retired, she remained behind to salvage what the day had left unused. A tray of beef ends, nearly spoiled. 2 onions softened past pride. A heel of hardened cheese. She worked alone, sleeves rolled, breath fogging faintly in the cooling kitchen. She trimmed rot from the meat with surgical care. Simmered the bones longer than usual to coax out depth. Caramelized the onions until their sweetness returned. Melted the cheese into the broth to thicken it. Spice, scarce, precious, she added last. Nutmeg, just enough to warm, not an ounce. The result was modest in appearance. Brown, unassuming. But when she tasted it, her shoulders loosened for the first time that day. It felt like winter made bearable. She ladled the stew into a service tureen, intending it for the servant's late meal. But the kitchen had grown chaotic again. Trays misdirected, footmen rushing, orders shouted across rooms. In the confusion, her tureen was lifted onto a silver service tray meant for the upper corridors. She did not see it leave, only noticed later that her pot was missing. Assuming it taken, she returned to scrubbing counters, fatigue settling into her bones like cold. Upstairs, candles burned low in the Duke's private dining chamber. He had eaten little in days. Travel weariness, political frustrations, the oppressive isolation of snowbound estates. When a new dish was placed before him, he regarded it without interest. Another winter stew, he presumed. Still, he tasted it. The spoon paused halfway back to the bowl. He tried again. Slower this time. There is nothing extravagant in the flavor. No costly wine reductions or French techniques fashionable among peers. Yet it held something rarer. Care, resourcefulness, warmth drawn from scarcity rather than excess. He finished the bowl without realizing he had done so. Then he set the spoon down gently and looked toward the footman. "Who prepared this?" he asked. The question traveled downward through corridors, stairwells, and servant halls like a dropped candle in darkness. By the time it reached the kitchen, she was still at the wash basin, sleeves damp, hair escaping its pins. The housekeeper's voice cut through the room. "You." The Duke requests the cook responsible for his supper. Water dripped from her hands as she turned. Fear moved faster than thought. Had she overstepped? Used spoiled stores improperly? Broken some invisible rule of rank? The kitchen fell silent as she removed her apron. No one offered reassurance. As she stepped toward the service corridor, the storm outside struck the walls with renewed fury, snow hurling itself against stone as though trying to enter. She followed the footman upward, each stair narrowing her breath. Below stairs, she had been invisible. Above stairs, invisibility was impossible. At the landing before the Duke's chamber, she paused, hands trembling faintly at her sides. Inside that room waited judgment, perhaps dismissal, perhaps exile back into the cold world that had already refused her once. The footman opened the door. Warm firelight spilled across her face. And somewhere beyond that glow, the man who had tasted her work and wanted to see the hands that made it, waited. She stepped forward, not knowing that this crossing of a threshold would alter the course of her life, or that before winter released its grip on the land, the word unwanted would lose its claim on her forever. Firelight pressed gently against her eyes as she entered the chamber, so warm it almost startled her. She kept her gaze lowered, aware of every small sound her shoes made against the polished floor. The door closed behind her with a softness that felt louder than a slam. The Duke stood near the hearth, one hand resting on the carved mantel, the other holding the empty bowl she recognized at once. For a moment, neither spoke. He was younger than she had imagined, not softened by idleness, but sharpened by responsibility. Snowmelt darkened the hem of his coat where it had not yet fully dried. He studied her not with disdain, but with quiet curiosity. "You prepared this?" he asked, lifting the bowl slightly. Her fingers tightened together. "Yes, Your Grace." There was no tremor in her voice, though her pulse beat fiercely at her throat. "It was not meant for the upper table," she added quickly. "The stores were declining. I believed it suitable only for staff." He regarded her a moment longer, then glanced back at the hearth as though considering something beyond the room. "It was the first meal in weeks that tasted of intention rather than obligation," he said. The words settled slowly, as though she needed time to understand them. "I would like you to prepare tomorrow's supper." She blinked once, uncertain she had heard correctly. "For you, Your Grace." "For the household," he clarified, though his gaze suggested the distinction mattered little. "Using whatever remains available. I am told you possess ingenuity." Praise, even measured, felt unfamiliar on her skin. She bowed her head. "I will do my best." As she turned to leave, he spoke again. "What is your name?" She hesitated, not from reluctance, but but from surprise that it had been asked at all. "Anna, Your Grace." "Thank you, Anna." The corridor felt colder when she stepped back into it, though nothing about the temperature had changed. Below stairs, word traveled faster than heat through iron pipes. By morning, every servant knew the Duke had requested her cooking directly. Reactions varied. Some expressed cautious approval, particularly those who had long benefited from her ability to make scarcity palatable. Others resented the disruption of order. The housekeeper summoned her privately. "You will remember your position," the older woman said, voice low but firm. "Preparing a meal does not alter hierarchy." "Understand," Anna replied, "and you will not grow accustomed to being summoned." "No, ma'am." The warning was less cruel than protective. Estates functioned on invisible lines. Crossing them invited consequence. Still, that evening, she cooked for the upper household. She worked with heightened precision, aware that every cut, every measure, now carried scrutiny. Stores were worse than she had feared. Flour near gone, salted meats thinning, root vegetables sprouting early rot. She adjusted instinctively. Bones simmered longer. Barley thickened broths meant for richer cuts. She roasted turnips until their bitterness surrendered to sweetness, glazing them with the last of the honey stores. When the trays were carried upward, silence followed. Servants waited for criticism to descend like winter hail. Instead, the dishes returned empty again. The pattern continued. Night after night, he requested meals from the same hands. He began visiting the kitchens himself, not formally, but in quiet intervals when most of the household had retired. The first time, conversation was minimal. He asked about ingredients. She answered in careful brevity. By the third visit, questions deepened. "How did you learn to preserve flavor without excess salt?" "My mother taught me, Your Grace, during lean winters." "And these spice balances?" "Regional traditions, sir, older than fashion." He listened as though such knowledge held equal weight to parliamentary debates. Snow worsened beyond the estate walls. Drifts buried stone fences. Village roads vanished. Messengers arrived frostbitten, bearing word that nearby tenants faced dwindling food as well. The Duke convened his steward and housekeeper. Anna was not meant to be present, yet her work had made her unavoidable in discussions of rationing. She spoke only when addressed, but when she did, her suggestions were practical. Stretch grain through communal stews. Rotate meat stores to prevent rot. Use outer kitchens to prepare broth for villagers without exposing central reserves. At first, the steward bristled at instruction from a maid, but necessity silenced pride. The Duke approved her proposals. Outdoor cauldrons were lit within 2 days. Anna oversaw them personally, sleeves rolled, breath clouding as she stirred kettles large enough to bathe children in. Villagers came wrapped in blankets, tin cups trembling in their hands. She served each portion carefully, equal measures, no favoritism. Children watched her with wide, solemn gratitude. Servants who had once dismissed her now followed her direction without protest. Respect, she learned, did not arrive through title, only through usefulness. One evening, as she returned from the relief fires, cheeks stung raw from wind, she found the Duke waiting near the kitchen entrance. "You've not rested," he observed. "There are many mouths," she replied simply. He studied her frost-reddened hands. "You organize these efforts as though you've done so before." "My mother managed winter stores for a smaller estate," she said. "I assisted." He nodded slowly, absorbing the revelation not as trivia, but as context. "You see the household as a whole system," he said, "not merely a kitchen." She had never heard her instincts described so precisely. "I see hunger before it arrives," she answered quietly. For a moment, neither spoke. Snow fell steadily beyond the courtyard lanterns, turning the world into a hushed, silver silence. Then came the interruption. Carriage bells, faint but unmistakable, echoed through the storm. Visitors. Unexpected. Ill-timed. Within hours, the household learned that a Marchioness, an aristocratic relation traveling north, had forced passage despite the weather and would reside at the estate until roads cleared. Her arrival altered the air at once. Formality returned where survival had softened it. Dining protocols reinstated. Servants repositioned into strict hierarchy again. Anna felt the shift immediately. Not spoken, but sensed in glances and tightened posture. The first supper under the Marchioness's presence demanded greater spectacle despite failing stores. Anna prepared the meal with disciplined calm, blending necessity with refinement as best she could. When the dishes were served, she remained below stairs, as always. But whispers soon followed the trays upward. The Marchioness, it was said, had praised the meal's warmth, though not its rustic composition. Then came her question: who prepared this? The dining hall stilled. Footmen exchanged brief looks. Protocol suggested deflection, crediting the head cook, preserving class illusion. But the Duke answered before anyone else could speak. The meal was prepared by one of our kitchen staff. A staff member? She repeated, intrigued. Yes. And what is her background? Silence lingered, delicate, dangerous. The Duke did not soften the truth. She is a maid. Cutlery paused across porcelain. Candles flickered as though reacting to the tension itself. The Marchioness smiled, not kindly, but with aristocratic amusement sharpened by disbelief. How progressive of you, she said lightly. Below stairs, Anna knew none of the exact words, only that tension rippled downward like cold seeping through stone. Later that night, as she scrubbed the last service trays, the housekeeper approached her with measured gravity. You are to present yourself tomorrow evening, she said. For what purpose? Anna asked quietly. The Marchioness wishes to see the girl whose cooking has altered the Duke's table. The words settled heavily between them. Curiosity from nobility rarely ended in comfort for those beneath rank. Anna returned to her narrow quarters long after midnight. She did not light her candle immediately. Instead, she stood at the frost-laced window, looking out toward the distant relief fires still burning beyond the estate walls. For the first time since arriving, her work had carried her name upward. Recognition, once unimaginable, now hovered near. It did not feel like safety. It felt like standing on ice not yet tested for strength. As wind pressed snow against the glass, she wondered which would come first, approval or fracture. The Marchioness arrived at dawn, her carriage wheels slicing through the half-frozen snow, the air heavy with her presence before she even stepped from the door. Every flake seemed to hush itself, as though aware of the scrutiny descending on the household. Servants hurried past, stiffened by protocol, while Anna lingered in the kitchen doorway, apron dusted with flour, hands pressed together to still their trembling. Inside, the Duke met the visitor with the calm precision of his station, his posture an unyielding statement. Anna watched from the shadows, aware that this encounter could shift the fragile trust she had begun to build. The Marchioness's eyes, sharp and calculating, flicked toward the kitchen staff, as though weighing each against an invisible scale of worth. Your Grace, she said, her voice smooth and deliberate. I hear the kitchens have been exceptional this winter. I trust the reports are accurate. They are, the Duke replied evenly, particularly those prepared by Anna. A subtle flicker of amusement crossed the Marchioness's face. A maid, you say? Preparing dishes worthy of a noble table. Anna's stomach twisted. She had anticipated skepticism, but the tone was sharper than she expected. Not curiosity, but subtle derision. Her hands itched to turn away, to vanish beneath the scullery stairs where judgment could not reach her. Yet the Duke did not hesitate. Her skill exceeds mere station, he said. Her understanding of sustenance and resourcefulness has kept this household functioning through the harshest storm in decades. The Marchioness raised a delicately arched brow. Resourcefulness, yes, but she is still a servant. Surely decorum must have some measure. She has preserved life, the Duke replied, voice low but unyielding. And in that, decorum becomes irrelevant. Anna pressed her hands against her apron, feeling the warmth of a quiet pride she had never known. Respect, she realized, was not granted by lineage or title, but earned by action. In the following days, the household adjusted to her presence in a new light. The Duke consulted her on ration planning for the staff and the villages alike. He listened intently as she suggested rotations for food, methods to stretch flour, and preserve meat. Each recommendation carried a weight of lived experience. Winter spent learning her mother's meticulous ways, observing what was necessary to sustain those who had no other recourse. Even the housekeeper, initially wary, began to nod during her proposals. The kitchen, once a domain of muted struggle, became a center of organized action under Anna's quiet authority. Smoke rose from outdoor cauldrons where villagers collected broth, and servants moved with purpose rather than fear. Anna's reputation spread beyond the estate walls, whispered among tenants as the girl who kept the Duke's estate alive during a merciless season. One evening, the Duke lingered in the kitchen long after the last pot was cleaned. Candlelight flickered across his face, highlighting the subtle fatigue etched in the corners of his eyes. "You have a remarkable way of seeing the household as a whole," he said softly. "Not merely the kitchens or the stores, but every moving part." Anna paused, her knife mid-chop. "I learned early," she murmured. "If one piece falters, everything suffers. Mother showed me how to notice what others overlook." He nodded, considering her words. The warmth from the hearth illuminated their shared silence. In those quiet moments, she felt a subtle shift, the first sense of equality she had known in her adult life. Not respect alone, but recognition of insight and capacity. The Marchioness, meanwhile, grew increasingly vocal about her disapproval. She observed dinners with thinly veiled contempt, her sharp glances casting doubts in the eyes of less confident staff. "Is it proper," she asked, "for a kitchen maid to direct the welfare of the estate?" The Duke's responses remained measured, firm but unflinching. "It is proper," he said once, in front of assembled staff. "Proper because she has ensured survival, steadiness, and loyalty in times when complacency would have destroyed all." Anna's cheeks flushed with a mixture of embarrassment and pride. She had never sought recognition. Yet in that moment, she understood that her work had become inseparable from her identity, no longer hidden beneath stares or service trays. She was visible, and it was a visibility earned by compassion, skill, and endurance. As winter pressed on, snow piled against the estate gates, sealing the world beyond in white silence. Anna coordinated deliveries of food to villagers trapped in isolated cottages, the Duke walking beside her as a steady presence rather than an overseer. They measured rations together, discussed efficiency, and planned relief kitchens large enough to feed dozens. Children came, eyes wide with hunger and wonder. Anna served each cup with care, remembering the small kindnesses her mother had taught her, the precise tilt of a bowl, the gentle nod of reassurance, the unspoken promise that warmth and nourishment would follow. In these moments, her heart swelled with a quiet, steady purpose. The Duke observed her, noting how she moved among the children and villagers, how her instructions inspired confidence rather than fear. He began to speak to her in moments between tasks, seeking her counsel on issues far beyond the kitchen, estate accounts, winter stores, even planning for spring planting. Each conversation deepened his awareness of her intellect, her foresight, and her unassuming courage. One evening, after distributing the last portion of a simmered stew, she returned to the kitchen, her hands raw from cold and steam. The Duke followed, placing a gentle hand near her shoulder. "You have done more than preserve food," he said. "You have preserved this estate and its people. That is worth more than lineage, more than reputation, more than the fleeting opinions of the outside world." Anna's throat tightened. Words she had once longed to hear, of worth, of recognition, came not as flattery, but as acknowledgement of the life she had built through labor, thought, and care. Yet beneath the quiet satisfaction, a tension lingered. The Marchioness's presence still hovered like a shadow across the estate. Gossip whispered through servants' corridors. Approval, though granted by the Duke, was not universal. Each visit, each comment from outside, threatened to unravel the delicate balance she had achieved. Winter's hold tightened. Snowdrifts blocked roads. Villages remained isolated. And in the evenings, when the kitchen quieted and the hearth burned low, Anna understood that the peace she had forged was fragile. A single misstep could undo months of labor, scrutiny, and careful diplomacy. She lingered near the window one night, looking toward the silvered hills beyond the estate. Smoke from village chimneys rose in small, determined curls. Children's laughter carried faintly on the wind. The Duke's presence behind her was steady, reassuring, yet unintrusive. She realized that the work she had once considered a duty alone had become a bridge between classes, between survival and despair, between fear and trust. Her hands, scarred from winter and labor, had built more than meals. They had built respect, reliance, and a fragile bond of mutual understanding with the Duke. The night settled into a hush, the snow pressing quiet against the estate walls. Anna allowed herself a brief moment of relief, though it was tempered by anticipation. The Marchioness's sharp eye had already begun to notice the subtle elevation of a kitchen made above her station. Whispers had reached her ears, faint but unmistakable, carrying doubt and judgment. She closed her eyes for a moment, inhaling the warm, scented air of the kitchen, feeling the weight of both accomplishment and scrutiny. This winter had changed her life, but the story was far from over. Challenges remained, recognition outside these walls had yet to be secured, and societal conventions loomed larger than any snowdrift. Yet, for the first time, she understood something she had not believed possible. Her work, her mind, and her heart were seen, and that visibility carried power. Beyond the frost-laced windows, the world remained harsh and indifferent. Inside, firelight danced across polished surfaces, reflecting her resolve. She would continue, not because she sought approval, but because she understood the weight of her own worth. And somewhere in that warmth, a quiet certainty took root. The storm had brought more than hardship. It had brought attention, opportunity, and the beginnings of a connection that neither snow nor scorn could easily undo. But even as she tended the last embers of the kitchen hearth, a shadow of tension lingered. The Marchioness's next move, the judgments of the wider world, and the fragile balance of newfound respect. Anna sensed it in the stiffened posture of the staff, in the hushed tones of whispered conversations, and in the watchful eyes of nobility. Tomorrow would demand more than skill with ingredients. It would demand courage, wisdom, and a steadiness of heart that she had only begun to discover. And in that quiet understanding, Anna prepared herself. The world above stairs would soon see not merely a maid, but a force capable of sustaining both hearth and heart, a truth that would test every convention and challenge every expectation. The snow pressed against the panes, wind rattling in its icy insistence, as if urging her onward. She straightened her back, wiped her hands, and allowed herself a faint, determined smile. Outside, winter raged, but within, a fragile warmth had taken hold, promising that even the harshest storms could not erase the value of what one truly carried within. That winter's grip had begun to loosen, though the estate remained blanketed in a heavy, glittering hush. Snow lay thick on the stone paths, softening footsteps and muffling voices. Anna moved through the quiet halls with careful grace, carrying the weight of months of labor and cautious recognition. Her hands, roughened and reddened by cold and firelight, bore witness to every hardship she had endured and every life she had touched. The Marchioness, observing from her gilded sitting room, had not relented. Her subtle barbs persisted, her disapproval now more pointed, aimed not merely at Anastasia, but at the influence she exerted. Rumors fluttered like restless birds through the hallways. Servants whispered of scandal. Even those once loyal glanced with a measure of doubt. Anna felt the tension at every step, each glance, each pause in conversation. The Duke, though, remained steadfast. He consulted her, as he had for weeks, about rations, village relief, and the gradual reopening of supply routes. In these moments, the Marchioness's opinion mattered little. The estate ran on Anna's careful planning, and he knew it. Yet he also understood the stakes beyond the walls. perception among peers, whispers in Parliament, and the potential for backlash that could undo all she had accomplished. One late afternoon, he found her in the courtyard, watching the children she had fed earlier run along the snowy lanes, laughter carrying faintly over the wind. He approached quietly, careful not to startle. "You have done more than preserve this household," he said. "You have preserved lives." Anna lowered her gaze, feeling the truth of his words settle like snow on her shoulders. "It was necessary," she murmured. "I cannot do otherwise." He studied her, noting the faint traces of frost still clinging to her hair and eyelashes, the way her hands moved even at rest, as if always measuring, always calculating. "Necessary, yes," he said, "but necessary and remarkable are not the same. You have shown wisdom that many of noble birth lack entirely." The statement lingered between them, a quiet acknowledgement of value that could not be disputed. Anna felt a stir of something she had long suppressed, a sense of belonging, of being seen not for what she lacked, but for what she contributed. Yet recognition alone did not erase the lingering tension. The Marchioness arrived unexpectedly, entering the courtyard with the crisp snap of gloves and fur-lined cloak. Her eyes found Anna immediately, sharp and assessing. "So," she said, voice smooth, "this is the girl who has guided the Duke's estate through winter. A servant who has dared to speak where she should have bowed." Anna straightened, drawing the remnants of fear into a thin, controlled line. She said nothing, awaiting the Duke's response. "She has earned her place," he said, voice steady and firm. "Through action, thought, and care, not through pedigree." The Marchioness's eyes narrowed. "And yet she is a maid." "Yes," he said, meeting her gaze evenly. "A maid who has sustained an estate and its people when others, born to comfort, could not have managed as she has." Anna felt a swell of respect and relief, tempered by the persistent weight of expectation. The Marchioness turned sharply and withdrew, leaving a silence that seemed to echo even louder than words. That evening, in the quiet warmth of the kitchen, Anna allowed herself a moment to reflect. Snow pressed against the windows, drifts high enough to block the landscape beyond. Fires burned low, sending tendrils of heat through the room, carrying the scents of root vegetables, roasting grains, and preserved meats. She felt the culmination of months of effort, a recognition of skill, courage, and endurance, yet also the fragility of the balance she had achieved. One misstep could undo her progress. The Duke approached, his steps light against the flagstones. "You do not rest," he observed, his tone gentle. "You have accomplished much, but your labor should not be endless." "I cannot," she replied quietly. "The work must continue while the need exists." He studied her, the weight of admiration and concern in his gaze. "There are choices beyond labor," he said. "Places where your talent and courage might be acknowledged in ways the outside world struggles to understand." She looked up at him, curiosity and caution mingling. "What do you mean?" "Your influence extends beyond the kitchen," he said. "Beyond the estate. Beyond this winter." His voice softened, almost to a whisper. "You have shown a capacity for leadership, for care, for foresight. It is rare, Anna, and it is recognized." The words settled over her like a quiet dawn. Recognition from the Duke had always mattered, but now it carried weight beyond her own understanding. A validation of insight, judgment, and the resilience that had carried her through rejection, snow, and scarcity. Weeks passed, and spring approached in cautious increments. Snow began to melt, revealing the first green shoots along hedgerows. Villages once isolated now stirred with renewed life. The Duke continued to consult her, now openly valuing her counsel on estate improvements, planting schedules, and broader household management. The staff, once hesitant, followed her instructions with unwavering commitment. Even the Marchioness, though never openly approving, could not ignore the results. And then, one late evening, the Duke spoke words that shifted everything between them. He found her alone by the hearth, the kitchen emptied of staff and tasks, quiet except for the soft crackle of fire. "Anna," he said, voice low and deliberate, I have seen what you are capable of, not merely as a maid, but as a steward of people, of lives, of responsibility. You have changed this household. You have changed how I see the world." She felt a tremor of something she could not name. Anticipation, fear, hope, all mingled together. "I would like you to remain, not only in title, but in partnership," he continued. "Not as an employee, but as someone whose judgment and care I trust completely." Her chest tightened. The words were profound, yet she hesitated. "I am only a maid," she said softly. "I have no claim to such a quality." "You have earned it," he said, the firelight catching in his eyes. "Not through name, not through birth, but through action, through wisdom, through courage." The acknowledgment silenced the cold doubts that had followed her since childhood. The whisper of being unwanted, unworthy, unseen. Here, finally, was recognition of the whole person she had struggled to protect and to define. The following days were filled with preparation. The Duke and Anna worked side by side to organize final winter provisions, ensuring that the relief kitchens would continue even as the thaw came. The estate, once tense with uncertainty and judgment, now functioned as a cohesive unit under her guidance. Still, society's scrutiny loomed. Letters arrived from London, hints of scandal and whispers of impropriety. The idea that a kitchen maid could rise to influence and authority over an estate disturbed many. Anna read the letters, hands steady, eyes clear. She understood that the path ahead would require both caution and courage. That visibility brought risk as well as respect. Yet for all that, she felt a quiet certainty settle within her. She had endured winter storms, isolation, and doubt. She had fed those in need, guided the estate, and earned the recognition of the man whose judgment she trusted most. The fragile warmth of accomplishment and emerging trust held steady against the cold of societal expectation. That night, as she stood near the frost-laced window, looking at the village lights twinkling through melting snow, Anna allowed herself a rare smile. The storm had not only tested her skill and endurance, but revealed a hidden depth of resilience. She was no longer merely a girl beneath stairs. She was a leader, a caretaker, and, perhaps unknowingly, a presence powerful enough to challenge tradition. And in that realization, she knew that the next step, the true assertion of her worth and recognition, was waiting just beyond the horizon. The world above stairs, with its scrutiny and convention, would soon demand more than her skill with food. It would demand courage, integrity, and the quiet strength she had spent the season cultivating. Outside, the wind carried the last whispers of winter, snow sliding from rooftops in soft cascades. Inside, the fire warmed the kitchen walls, reflecting in Anna's eyes a steadfast determination. The storm had passed, but the journey toward acknowledgement, equality, and perhaps something deeper had only just begun. And as she turned back to tend the last embers, she understood one truth above all: that worth, once proven through action, could not easily be denied. The coming days would test it, and she would be ready. Tomorrow, the world would see not merely a maid, but a force shaped by hardship, guided by compassion, and prepared to claim the recognition she had earned. The snow continued to melt, but within her a fire had ignited, a fire that neither frost nor judgment could extinguish.